says something went wrong. Okay, let's see if things are online. Okay, YouTube is not live. LinkedIn is not live. Great.
No stress from my side.
Okay.
It's just
YouTube is okay. YouTube is fine. And let's.
Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. We're live.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, just waiting for people to. Okay, so all the streaming is working. Great. Right.
Great.
So so hello everyone whoever is watching. So I see already a couple of people watching. We're just gonna wait just a couple of more minutes and then to see if more people join, and then we're gonna get started with Kevin here.
Awesome.
We already have some interesting questions on the Discord channel on the community, so we're gonna discuss about it.
Great.
Okay, let's get started. So, hello, Kevin. Welcome to the Product Engineers Meetup. This is a meetup after all. And so Kevin is one of the founding engineers of Andsend, which he's an AI relationship agent that helps consultants and freelancers stay connected with their networks. So Kevin, could you share just a few words about you, your story, and what you do at Andsend? What problem you're trying to solve there?
Absolutely. So thanks for inviting me first and foremost. And I could share a bit of context. So yes, I'm one of the founding engineers, although I'm also co-founder and CEO. So I have less time to do engineering, so to speak, in a traditional manner these days, unfortunately. But I am an engineer from the start. So I started programming when I was very young, and then I've been building some different businesses over the years. And my last startup was probably the most famous one, very infamous in the end, because but what we did was we built a sales automation platform called Zaplify, and during that project we managed to get to a few thousand customers, so it got pretty big. But then in the end, the world changed, and we didn't really believe in sales automation anymore, so we closed that startup down, and instead we founded a new company called Andsend, which is the current mission I'm on. And what we've seen is basically that as AI and machines are automating outreach, and that AI slot is filling our feeds and so on, people are actually starting to go back to more relation-based sales and networking. So the reply rates on automated campaigns and so on have dropped quite a lot, and people are making people want to make business with people, and that is the insight we've had. So with Andsend, we're trying to make it easier to stay in touch with all of your hundreds, if not thousands, of connections that you have. It's very easy often to lose track of who you're talking to, and drop the ball basically with different people. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. So suggest the right action for the right person at the right time, which is quite a challenging engineering. It's an engineering challenge for sure, because it's about classifying a lot of data and understanding what's important and what's not. So that's the general story. And then if I'm gonna like roll over into me as a CTO, maybe in my old startup Saplify, because there I was co-founder and CTO, and I was leading the organization in a bad way, or today I see it in a bad way, because the way, did I lose connection there? Yeah. So the way I was leading that project was basically with traditional Scrum. So we had UX and UI designers, we had engineers, we had QA, and then product manager, which was basically me as well. And the process was great. We had backlog with stories and epics, of course, at the top, and bugs came in, we solved them quickly, and we were working in 1 week sprints back in Saplify. And what we did then was we figured out what is the important aspects of like the important problems, and gave those to the UX and UI designers, and figured out solutions, and then gave that to the engineers. That's sort of like just classic discovery delivery. And the problem in that type of organization is, of course, that you end up creating a lot of bottlenecks. That's one aspect of it, like from a performance perspective. But of course, the engineers are also very unmotivated, which we know, the community knows, right? It's not a fun way of working, but it was the only way I knew. And then I got in contact with actually one of the product engineers that we have now in Andsend, who has worked a lot in Silicon Valley and seen a lot of different organizations. His name is Anders Fredriksson, and he's one of the people who came with this idea like 3 years ago to me. And he came from the engineering side of things, just suggesting how can we care less about the product we're building and more about the factory, was his kind of take on it. If we instead build a factory whose purpose is to spit out iterations of the product, can we actually start finding problems ourselves and seeing the product from a higher level of ownership as engineers? And this was around the same time as ChatGPT came out, and version 3. And when that came, I saw instantly what Anders meant, but I came from the product side of things more, and thought that, well, this changes things, because it actually allows us to fill in the gaps in skill areas where engineers are not as strong. So if we look at typically what software engineers are strong at, it is the code, on the understanding the problem, turning it into a solution, and so on. But with AI, it was looking like, and now we can see it more than ever, that everything is pushing people more to be able to do much more and be broader. Even if you have your specialty where you're strong, you get like a broadened skill set quite quickly if you utilize AI in a strong way. So we thought, okay, can we change our process here to actually make everyone care more about the customers in the end, right? Because I, as a founder in Saplify, I knew that what makes nothing makes you feel as much ownership as if you meet the customers, you feel the problem, you don't just see it, you feel the problem by actually creating a connection with the customer and making a promise even to the customer, maybe on like, yeah, we need to fix this. And then you go back to the drawing table, you sketch that wireframe out, maybe get some expertise help from a designer if you need, and then you ship it to production. And thanks to AI, basically that opportunity started to open up. So we invested a lot in our factory then, and invested a lot in the team, just making everyone. First of all, what we did. Sorry, and stop me if I'm talking too much now.
No, please continue.
Yeah, all right. So the first thing we did was we sat down with the whole team and just sketched out, or like kind of drew out all of our bottlenecks that we had. So to make the engineers aware. So, for example, how much time are we losing when we give a task to a designer, and then it bounces back and forth, maybe between the product manager and the designer, and then eventually the product manager needs to deliver it to the team. Just that process, well, we're losing maybe 2 days on average because the product manager is in so many meetings. And we did all of these bottleneck mapping, and it came down to that we lost, I don't know what it was, like 40 days per week or something crazy in just bottlenecks and lead times. And that was only a team of, we were 9 people, I think, in total at the most. That made the problem very apparent. And then we went on the journey to, what if the engineers also get to care about the metrics that we have? So we're using Amplitude as our platform to track all our metrics and all our users and how they are interacting with the platform and so on. And we then spend quite a lot of time on workshopping in Amplitude, like with the question of, can we find what is blocking our one metric that matters? So basically our active users, our weekly active users was our one metric that matters back then. Can we find the bottlenecks that are blocking us from getting there in terms of metrics? And engineers, they loved that exercise, because that was like, since it's numbers and everything. So that was how we even got the most heavy backend engineers to start caring. That was, I think, the starting point for this whole journey, and that was, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago now. And then most of the team today in Andsend are actually people that were in that team as well. So that's why it gives context. So even if Andsend has just been around now for a year, this we say movement towards product engineering that I will talk more about has been ongoing for longer. And what has been really interesting throughout the journey is how people that were traditionally very heavy engineers, so like they even came from like being very, they knew math and they wanted to do math and complex algorithms and so on. Those people might as well be the ones becoming your best UI designers and UX researchers, which is, in lack of a better word, a bit almost beautiful to see. Like people are finding their strengths through actually getting freedom. And now you need to do everything. You need to build, you need to research, you need to hypothesize, you need to design, you need to build, send to production, test it, and evaluate it, and then go back to the beginning and report, of course, like understand, was this change successful or not? And then you go back in iteration. And if you can do that one person, that's helpful, but it's even better if you can go like 2 people on a pair to own one problem together. So it's like you do everything together, or even 3 people. So that's where we come to pair programming or even mob programming and so on. But not just doing it on the programming part, but doing it for the whole problem. So these are things that we found during the process were very helpful for us, because I don't believe in an organization where everyone is like solo product engineers, I think, where everyone is just finding problems on their own and solving them, because then we've tried that as well, and the product is kind of diverging a bit and it can become messy. But if you work as small dynamic teams, like product groups is what we call it, it becomes, you find teamwork within those small teams, and you can work as fast or even faster maybe, but with much higher confidence. Yes. And there's a lot more to this process and the journey, but I want to stop there so we have time for you to do the call as well.
Of course, of course. No, it's very interesting. Thanks for sharing the whole your story, the storyline. The last point was quite interesting, and I agree with you that when you have engineers trying to look for problems and then solve them by themselves, can get quite a bit of like there is a bit of anarchy there, and you still need that kind of teamwork so people can share the effort and the goals together. So it's very interesting that you said that now pair programming. I mean, pairing doesn't only happens on the programming side, but also on the whole cycle of product development. How does that work in practice? So, like, do the engineers like they pair in interviews in doing design together? So just literally everything. And in that case, what defines a team? Like, what becomes the responsibility of a team in that when everyone pairs and maybe even works in an ensemble, even more than two people? How do things change?
Yeah, very good questions. So where I can start with this is I can just start with from one thing. I also mentioned this to a question in the Discord channel yesterday, that one thing we did during this journey was also to drop the backlog. I think it was about 2 years ago, because since coming from Scrum and everything, we had this backlog with everything we wanted to do and everything was figured out. We had it planned, and I was the owner of the backlog as well, and it hurt a lot. It was very difficult, of course, to let go. But basically, what I did was we removed everyone from Jira because we were using Jira. So I still had the project in case I would need it. But what's funny is that we never needed it again. But that was like the big bandage that had to be ripped once we felt ready for it. Because what we found was that when you have a product manager that like is the gatekeeper for, or like planner for everything, then you have your sprints that are kind of planned. And if, of course, the team can contribute and comment on that and so on, but in the end, it's kind of in a way predetermined, which is not what Agile was built for in the beginning, right? Agile, people over process, and then Scrum came and made it process over people, I guess. But
Let's say it out
that's
loud.
that's what we had to remove, just to make it possible for everyone to actually get freedom. So I was still, during the nights in the beginning, sitting with my computer and looking at this perfectly structured project in Jira and just enjoying the structure, and also crying a bit that we will have to let this go now. I should be honest and say that, but I'm so happy that we did, because that was the enabler for all of this. So back to your question then suddenly everyone realized that we don't know what to do anymore, right? Because it's like so, and everyone knew then how to handle the metrics, and everyone had started to go on some user interviews, or basically just onboarding calls. That's been our unlock for it. So once a user sign up in the service, either they sign up by themselves and then they get invited to onboarding calls, and we always make sure that there's not just a business person. We don't have business people like that. Everyone's like part of the product team. Even if you're a customer success manager, you contribute. But still, let's say a customer success manager then, and also an engineer or product engineer. And that was very important. And then also to split up so that everyone got to talk to different customers. And now lately we've also been experimenting with that product engineers might be owning the relationship entirely with the user, to also manage follow-ups and so on. But you have to keep a balance, of course. So not everything they do is sitting in meetings. So they have to, they can control that themselves by simply like how many meetings they want to be in. But the goal is for everyone to be in basically one meeting or 3 meetings per week. Is what we have now. So that is key, because then they can discuss, everyone can discuss in the team, and everyone see the customer point of view, and everyone sees the different aspects of it. And from that and from the metrics, we create hypotheses, basically. So sitting in the room with everyone, or on a call, saying that I have a hypothesis on this, or maybe you share your screen and you share an insight that you've put together in a nice way, and then you might find someone else who is very interested in like exploring that problem with you, just ask someone. So it's pretty dynamic how those product groups are formed. And we can be dynamic since we don't have a backlog and we don't have the traditional sprints in that way. So we see it more as if we have daily sprints. So every stand-up is basically a sprint planning for the day. And it's silly, of course, to call it a sprint, but everyone knows what a sprint is, and everyone comes from that. That's like your kind of lowest unit of iteration in a way in a traditional Scrum. So the mindset shift is very interesting. How everyone just thinks about, okay, today we should get this and this to production, like, or this hypothesis to production. So we deploy on average more than one new feature or iteration per day per engineer, actually, even though we're so basically two iterations per two people, you could say. So the frequency is a lot. And then of course we use feature flags to roll it out and so on, so that we don't break the app for everyone at the same time. We do that sometimes as well, because we're a startup, but we try to use feature flags as much as possible. And then our biggest challenge is, how do you evaluate it? Because you can't evaluate it the same week, of course. And it's the same if you do a 1 week sprint, because if you deploy something on Thursday, then you won't evaluate it until the week after. So that feedback loop is still like the main challenge, because ideally when you talk about bottlenecks, it would be amazing if you wouldn't have any, if you could actually get the insights on the same day as you deploy. But in reality, it's very hard, because you have your cohorts and everything. And especially in a startup like us, it's more about talking to the users and asking them and understanding how their experience evolves to get that qualitative insight, and then back it up with data to support your experiments and hypotheses. So what I'm saying there is basically not everything can be attributed, right? Especially not if you have only 1,000 users or so,
right,
as we do right now.
I'm getting a question already from the audience. They want to understand, like, if you can give like a concrete example of an hypothesis. How does it look in practice?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the hypotheses can look different depending on like if they're on the website, or if they're deep in the product, right? Or if they're on the back end. But what we aim to do is to always have a very crisp way of describing like the assumption that you have, and then of like, what do you want to do? So for example, let's say introducing a product demo on the website in the hero will, and then you need to define like a metric or some way to define like, how do we know that we have been successful, right? So to introduce a product video in the hero on the website, that should not increase the number of signups, because that's a bad metric, but rather increase the activation or something like that, or the number of activated users. So you have something further in, and then you can have a supportive metric as well, which is like, that could be the number of signups to understand. So it's about bringing together the data in the end to evaluate if the experiment has been successful, or a hypothesis has been successful. But it can be as simple as that, basically. So it's more like an experiment card almost.
Okay.
And that's how we define it. And together with that, you could of course have a suggestion on what the video should be about, like a few lines of, like, in the product, it's easier to explain because then you would just have a simple mock-up or something for what your hypothesis is. So you can present it to the team. And that's just something we drop in a Slack channel, or maybe you bring it up in a video, presenting it to the team if you have a lot of things to talk about and you know that, well, this is a pretty big bet, and then you need to have feedback from the team to understand, is the confidence high enough? So like, I guess you can see it as if every product group or every product engineer is almost like a product manager in that sense, and that when we meet together and when we have this forum where we talk together and talk about hypotheses, we come together as product managers from different teams almost to form a product board where we debate some of the bigger challenges we have and so on. And then every product engineer or product manager lead their army of AI engineering agents in Cursor or Claude or whatever you use, right? But that's the factory we're building, at least, so to speak. So yeah, I'm not sure if that like explains the process more, like how we go from hypothesis to then everyone taking ownership, deploying it, and then back to evaluate it.
Yep. So these hypotheses are generally like product problems, right? They don't involve anything technical, just something that involves the product.
Yes.
Okay.
And it could also be like for the like pretty algorithmic hypothesis. Like, for example, since our product is much about finding the right action for the right person at the right time. So let's say someone has a hypothesis that if we introduce these 3 dimensions to our vector space, where we have defined like that our feed is basically feed of actions is pulling data from to get the priorities, then that should increase the number of clicked cards in the feed, for example, right? Then you have a pretty technical problem or a technical hypothesis.
Okay. So you move from product to also the solution space. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And cool. So it's an interesting choice of words when you say factory, because I think someone may be thinking
we're not
like,
a feature factory. I want
yeah,
to be clear on
exactly.
that. It's an iteration factory, right?
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So would you say that the output of this factory are outcomes? I don't know. It's kind of. Would you say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what the goal is with the factory, or?
Yeah. So I mean, the feature factory has this kind of bad reputation because you are focused on outputs. Doesn't matter the outcome, but I think in your case, the outputs is actually the outcome. So you are trying to create outcomes.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. So we have our one metric that matters, or maybe 2 or 3 one metric, like North Star metrics, and everything we do should increase or like improve those metrics, right? So that is the ultimate goal. And then you, of course, you need to break down that into bottlenecks. Like, what are our main bottlenecks to improve them? And that is usually where your experiments come from when finding those bottlenecks and so on. So I could actually, one more thing to the process there, how we work that is very important, is that we have these daily sprints and so on, but that's not everything, because it's very important when we work like this that we also come together often to gather and form our focus for the next cycle, as we call it. So in Scrum, for example, you might have your product managers from different teams meeting every quarter, for example, to set big initiatives for the next quarter, right? Or themes. And we do the same, but we do it every 3 weeks instead, or every 4 weeks. So that's also like just compressed. We have as many sprints in one of these, but we set the big initiatives down. So we evaluate the initiatives from the last cycle, and those can be quite large large aspects of the product or of the growth model or whatever. So now this cycle we're in now, we're about 1.5 weeks in, and one of our current initiatives is to create a team offering attractive for larger teams, because until now we've been quite focused on the freelancers and the smaller boutique sized firms, but now we think that we have like solved enough problems there to actually bring this to the larger firms, but they want to solve different problems and so on. So that's like one of the 2 initiatives that we have for this cycle. And then we spend about 2 days physically together, doing a lot of workshops and like debating different initiatives and like looking into metrics heavily and so on together. So
Cool. I'm sure you're making a lot of engineers out there very jealous of the way you work.
okay.
Yeah. So let's get a bit into the role of the product engineer within Andsend at the moment. So one thing that stuck with me that you said before is that even engineers that are very focused on the back end side of things, they started to bring some work related to UX or UI, and they were working in that sense as well because they had the freedom to try, right? So that makes me wonder how when you tap into a domain that is not yours, so it's been like something maybe you haven't been done for a while, there could be the challenge that maybe you don't know exactly what are the best practices, the best you don't have like maybe the whole tool set to make the right decisions. So how have you been kind of tackling this issue? Have you been like maybe funding training or trying to get a bit more time to research the best way to do things? So I think that could be an interesting thing to get into.
Yeah, no, it's an important aspect of it. So it's good that you brought it in. And the way I think the biggest missing tool set in a way has been the UX research and the UI development for us, at least. In the beginning, it was actually front-end coding because we were almost only backend engineers, and then everyone suddenly had to become full stack. That's how far we had to make this transition. So it was very specialized in the beginning, but front-end was very easy for everyone to learn. But then when it came to the UX and UI, it was not as clear because suddenly you started to move into territory that you hadn't really worked with. Almost no one had worked as a product manager, for example, or in a product team traditionally. So that's where I guess the ones that had, for example, me, had to help the others and like coach them a bit, but also just encouraging everyone to read up, maybe sign up on a course or like watch YouTube and try out yourself. And that's one part of it. But then we also have the AI side of it here, where AI can actually fill in the gap. So what we do is we gather all the transcripts from our user interviews in folders. So we structure the transcripts, and then you can actually ask your Drive folder or whatever we use, Google Drive, what problems you have right now, and you can start getting suggestions on like, well, maybe there's a problem here, or maybe you have a hypothesis that you've seen in calls, so you can put your hypothesis to the agent and ask, is this a common theme among other interviews that I haven't been part of, and so on. And then of course you can start seeing something that triggers you to, okay, I want to investigate this in the metrics, and then you start investigating the metrics, and you can create a hypothesis suddenly because you see something in the metrics that also pops up in the interviews. You can marry the qualitative and quantitative data and build something strong. And then you can just ask the AI agent to give you some suggestions on how to solve it, like in terms of being a UI designer, which is what we do. Some more than others. Not everyone has like embraced this like AI native way of working, but I'm doing it quite a lot actually myself when I have something that I want to design. So I just ask it to give me some kind of UI and a hypothesis that are like prompt for a UI designer, and then I put that into Lovable, where I have a clone of Andsend, which is not really working, but it's still like a clone. So I can put in my UI prompt there, and it just gives me a new prototype, and then I can show that off to the rest of the team after having done some fixes. So with tools like Lovable, Bolt and Replit, etc., V0, you can actually get quite a lot of competence, so to speak, from a UI agent that helps you, even though you might not know the right solution. So that has also helped us quite a lot, just embracing AI in building prototypes and mockups.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I can
we
imagine
actually
also
don't use
sorry,
Figma.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, no, just to clarify, we don't use Figma at all anymore. We only use tools like Lovable, or even just prompt it away in Cursor. So we make it on our local and then share it to the rest of the team.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I was saying, I think also with the pace you have, like you go quite fast with all your like daily sprints, and you're very focused on the impact. So I guess you get quite early a feedback about if the impact of the UI choice you made. So you're actually learning also what's working, what doesn't work very fast. So even with someone that doesn't have experience, you're learning on the job, which is surely the best thing to do, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
yeah,
that's right, and it's also since everyone's sitting with customers, they also feel ownership in a different way of like actually making it good, because they will have that customer, that face and that voice in their mind when designing it. So that's
yeah.
also good.
I may be saying something maybe controversial here, but
Mm-hmm.
talking with a lot of designers in my career, I suspect that they don't usually have the chance to do this properly. So this is something that designers complain a lot about, that they are like, as in our field we have code monkeys, they have pixel monkeys. So they are hired to just go on Figma and design UIs out of nowhere, maybe without doing proper research and everything.
Mm.
So it seems like product engineers, for what I'm seeing in different companies, they are actually doing that way more and way more often. So I wouldn't be surprised if they become quite good in a short amount of time, because it's kind of part of
Yeah.
the essence of being a product engineer, right?
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. Controversial or not, I think. Yeah. It's like we have to separate like traditional organizations, and of course, in the
Yeah.
traditional way of seeing it, I think it often can be viewed that way. Um, yeah, and so just speaking, yeah. So I think you're right that the engineers are really close to the problem in a way, and like that's what we've seen as well when we made this move, that suddenly everyone was really good at understanding customer pain points and so on. It was just so much easier um, to convince people about things, like coming from the product manager perspective myself, uh, like just understanding that I barely have to be a product manager, and maybe there's not even need for a CPO type of role. That would only be when you meet once a month or whatever to
Hmm.
decide on these initiatives. You need someone to facilitate those workshops and kind of set the vision and steer in the right direction. I think that can be AI as well in the future, something just consuming all the metrics and transcripts and really like, but we're not there yet. I
Yeah.
think it has to be a human. But anyway, with that said, we've seen also that when engineers that don't come from UI and UX make changes and make designs, it will diverge, and sometimes it can be a bit messy, like the product isn't holistic in the same way. So for that reason, I think it can always be good to have an expert in the loop. Maybe you bring in fractional UX UI designers, so someone that is really good at tightening things up and like challenging the team with an outside perspective, or maybe like bring on a board of customers together with the UX designer that can even propel that further. I think that's good. And there's like a need for experts to come in from time to time, depending on what your needs are, to fill in the gaps. And that can be really helpful, to not solely rely on that everyone can build the expertise they need, but to also just feel like, what gaps do we need to fill in?
Yeah, makes sense. Makes me think about how postdoc works. It's kind of similar. So they have small teams, and they have designers, but there isn't like a designer per team. So it's just for all the company, and they can consult them maybe for more complex interactions. So it's really similar. And so talking about, sorry, just people calling me. Talking about scalability. So how do you think this approach can scale? Like, let's say now you're a startup, and then you hopefully and you will grow and become a scale up. And how do you see this working? And I think that's going to be also a new challenge, and maybe also different. We will need a different way to organize teams to make this work and keep this kind of product engineering mindset.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I need to be honest and say that, I haven't tested it yet, of course. So
what's your hypothesis?
Something I'm looking forward to. Yeah, exactly. Something I'm looking forward to. I think the most important part of it will be observability and like some type of reporting, that you need to make sure to actually create document, like, now we have this hypothesis, we made this change, this is the metrics connected to it, and somehow that needs to end up visible to everyone else, to not make a lot of changes without everyone being aware of it. Because the more people you are, we see that sometimes ourselves, and then suddenly there's a change that you wasn't aware about, and it's been there for 2 weeks, and then you've been telling customers something else or whatever, like, since it affects everything when everyone's meeting customers and so on. So that type of observability and reporting, I think, that layer. And I can take an example of one organization who has, or a few organizations that have made this, and this is also to Anders Fredriksson, one of the founding engineers. So I personally wouldn't say that I'm a you can think whatever you want about Elon Musk, but if there's one thing that he did, it is to have built Tesla, which is a new company in a very old industry. And like when they started Tesla, it was like no one could understand how will you be able to challenge this industry. And then now, fast forward a decade or two, it's like a Tesla on every fifth driveway, I guess. There's so many Teslas in the world. And how they did it was by doing it different, right? Thinking different. And in a Tesla factory, the engineers work exactly like this. So they go out in the production, they have a hypothesis, they make a change, and they observe metrics, and they document their change, of course. But they can do that in a day, and then watch what happens to optimize the factory. It is a factory, of course, but still, to make the factory better. And that is why they were able to reduce their costs so much and improve their frequency and output. I think their goal is to output like one car every 10 seconds or something like that. And they are like at one car every 90 seconds now. Don't quote me on that, but there's something like that, which is just insanely much faster than any of their competitors ever were. And that is a pretty big company. That's just one example. And then you have AWS, of course. They're quite known for having pioneered, one of the pioneers at least, behind just pushing to production and letting engineers have full ownership of that. And they pushed, I don't know, the last article is like from 2014, and then they pushed once a second or something to production. But that's just, it's a very big organization. And I think the key is that everyone cannot be aware of everything happening and so on. So you need to have observability and different ways of rolling it out slowly and making it fail. If it's going to fail, it needs to fail fast and with a low blast radius. That's very important. So that is how I see it scaling, like still maintaining the ownership and everything, but work a lot on the observability and sharing hypotheses and making that clear. Every morning when you get to work, you need to know what happened yesterday, at least on some type of scale that impacts what you're working on right now.
Yeah, I can imagine also there could be some challenges in terms of communication. So probably would still need some kind of coordinating role. So maybe that's where PMs, like the actual PM, can start having more sense, because like managing the context and then where that, and they can kind of work as a compass for all the product engineers and different teams to understand what's the right direction. Because I think context also is it's a big thing, right? As the companies grow, how do you hold all this context in just a few ads, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's at least a good solution, as long as the product that PM doesn't write tickets, right? That's very important.
Right.
And then only acts as the, I don't know, facilitator of information somehow. If they can pick up that information has been missed or something, that might be something. And ideally, if you can automate it somehow and just have information being delivered by a Slack bot or whatever, I don't know. But yeah, for sure, communication is important. Will be a lot more important when you go.
Cool. So before getting into the QA session, what's the big next challenge for you, Kevin, but also for your company?
That's a good question. For us as a company, it is. I mean, we're a startup that is challenging old ways of doing things, since we believe in that the future of business basically is built on building authentic relationships and being able to do that at scale. So not using, I don't believe, I usually say that I don't believe that you will send your AI avatars to have lunch together over a business meeting, right? So it's about how do we empower that future. And the hard part about that is, of course, making people aware of the transformation that is happening and making them buy into the vision and everything, which is, and it's so lovely to see when it's starting to happening. So we have about 1,000 users in total. Maybe not all of them are active still, to be honest, but we have a few hundred at least consultants in our ideal customer profile that really love the product, and they're sharing it on LinkedIn and so on about their experience. So the challenge now is to make sure that they continue to love it, and that we can grow with them, so that we can follow our vision. Basically, it's just a classic startup comment, but that is the challenge right now, to get from our current, we have a product, we have customers, and to get to the phase where we are proper sustainable company that can continue to do this over time, and grow with the needs of our customers. So that's the challenge.
Yeah. Cool. So I wish you the best of luck, of course. So let's get into the QA session. Let's see. So we have a few questions from the community and also some questions on YouTube. Let's have a look. So the first question is from Adam on the community, and so he had a question about the daily sprints. So probably we already answered this. But he
Yes,
says
it's
that
more of a mindset shift. Yeah.
So he says that sprints are usually used for demos and some to reflect on what you build and on your work, and then adjust, like whatever you're doing. So how does this work on a single day? So how do you reflect on what you've been doing, and are there any rituals across the day?
Yeah.
And when people get sick, what happens? All these dynamics. So I think the main
Yeah.
question is how do you translate the practice, like the ritual of a longer sprint to one sprint? What happens during the day?
Yeah, no, so yeah, it is a great question. And what we do is we have stand up every morning. So that is like the ritual, so to speak, on a daily basis. But the stand up is more about saying what you did. Yeah, and we say, what did you do last day? And what are your hypotheses for today? Like, what do you want to work on today? And it's just that the way we work is usually something new, right? So that is what makes it a sprint in a way. But then we have some room as well after the stand-up every morning to actually demo some of these hypotheses you have or what you did last day, so you can inform the rest of the team or maybe even non-technical people on like what has changed or what is about to change, and then get their input later. And then there's always a meeting leader for the week that is like so we spin that around, who is leading the meetings. And then and that person needs to be rigorous in like stopping a conversation if it spins out of control, and then that has to become a separate meeting or maybe a Slack thread or a video where someone can like explain it more thoroughly if it's yeah. So there can be some spin-offs from that stand-up meeting. That is something we do every day. It's very important. And then we have once a week we have like a product forum as well, where we talk more generally to make sure we're on track for our initiatives that we decided for the cycle. So it's like in a traditional process, you might have your quarters where you do the initiatives, and then you have a monthly review or something, and you have your weekly sprints. And we've just compressed it. So instead of pushing 15 sprints into a quarter, we push 15 sprints into 3 weeks. And then instead of having monthly reviews, we have weekly reviews in a way. So it's and it's possible because we don't need to hand over things between people, right? So you don't have to wait for a code review even. It's just you just do what you want to do and what you believe in on a daily basis. And we save 40 days per week, right? So that's what's making it possible per engineer, I think. But so very similar rituals, and we have retros every now and then when we need it. But definitely we have a retro when we do our initiatives evaluation for the quarter, so to speak. And that's probably because we're such a small team and we're very tight, so we don't usually we wouldn't need a retro every week, not yet at least. But that might be something we have to introduce to just make sure we don't fall out of line with each other or whatever. So that's that. And then if someone gets sick, of course, you have these product teams that you form, so you shouldn't be alone. It has actually worked quite a lot. I haven't thought about that before, but it's just working somehow. And you might just have to pull someone else in then, and it might be one day delayed. Once push it to the next sprint the next day.
Right. Cool. So next question. So I think it's from Daniel. So he's the same person that asked about the hypothesis before. So related to it, it's so you said that product engineers can set their own metrics, which is probably easier on the product side. But as you said, there are also technical hypotheses. Things can get a bit more fuzzy there. So how do you define impact in that sense of metrics when it's something a bit more technical?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think if you have a large software product with a lot of users, you can actually do attribution on quite a low level. So you could evaluate, like, if you have two different algorithms, you're A/B testing for something specific. Like, for example, our recommendation feed that we have, you could actually A/B test those different. I'm not sure, like, if you have something very technical, like, for example, if you start fine-tuning models and you want to compare models, that's the same thing. And if you can attribute that to some kind of ratio, some kind of qualitative metric, that would be good. But for us, we actually don't have that luxury yet, unfortunately. So since we don't have 1 million users, or not even 100,000 users, so we need to rely quite a lot on qualitative interviews. So that's also why we have to, like, build relationships with our users and our customers, and to involve the product engineers from the beginning, from the onboarding in those relationships, to basically ask them and so on. And then, of course, if we also employ what's called session replays for people that accept cookies, which is heavily debated, of course, but it's if you accept it, we will redact sensitive information and so on, of course, but it gives us a lot of insight, because you can actually follow the users, how they're using your product, and understand what is driving the pain points and so on. It's like a third data point apart from your interviews, apart from your metrics. You also have recordings and so on. So we try to build confluence with a lot of different data points to figure out if it was good or bad changes. And we do a lot of, not maybe the smallest changes, because those are the difficult ones to attribute, but try to make even like medium-sized changes more, because then you can understand if it was good or bad in a better way. So high blast, but on a small radius, because we roll it out slowly.
Right. Cool, thanks. One last question before wrapping up. I think this question is not related much to the product engineering thing. It's probably more targeted to your entrepreneurial spirit. So I think it's still Daniel wants to know. So he has this idea for a browser extension, and he would like to understand how he can reach an audience to test his ideas. So talking about hypotheses, what would you recommend him as a first step?
If you have an idea to like reach out to the audience.
Yeah, so okay. He has an idea for building this product, which is a browser extension, and he'd like to understand how it can reach an audience to test the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it always starts with who is experiencing the problem, and your ideal customer profile, and like who has this problem that the browser extension is solving, and where are those people today. So for example, if I'm if I'm building some kind of email productivity app, I would, for example, I could join a Reddit forum where people are very dedicated about like productivity, or even email productivity. You can find these small communities, and like if I'm building a product for product engineers, this would be a great place to test it, for example. So the product engineering community, and find those small communities to try it early. I think that's where you can find the early adopters and really test it out, and then they will spread the word as well if it's great, and they will probably it's very likely that they also want to help you develop it. So if you build something for farmers, then you have a very different target group, a very different place. They might not be hanging out on Reddit, but there might be a Facebook group for local farmers or whatever, or like a conference and so on. So building the tools for that small group of people, I think, is always the key, and listening to them as early as possible. I'm not sure if that answers the question. But...
Yeah, I'm sure it's been useful. Thank you very much, Kevin. So it's time to wrap this episode up. And Kevin, it's been great having you. And thank you very much for sharing all your experience and with this product engineering culture. It's been very inspiring. And thank you. Where can people find you if they want to ask you any questions or any clarification?
Yeah. First off, thanks a lot for having me on. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best channel to reach me. So /Kevin Ostlin at LinkedIn.
Cool. I'll make sure to add it in the notes.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Kevin.